Important conversation tonight. The Paw Sox new owner is here, and we want to know where that whole deal stands. Yes, we took a little walking tour of what could be home plate and the short right field porch last week, but Jim Skeffington is here to talk about where they are in the process right now, they being the new ownership of the Paw Sox. Will they still be called the Paw Sox? Who knows? I guess that has to do with whether or not they're moved out of Pawtucket and when. So we'll examine the whole conversation in moments from now. It is a pleasure to have you aboard. Thanks for tuning in to My State of Mind. I am Dan York, and I'm going to shorten up the rundown here tonight so that we've got some quality time with Mr. Skeffington, but we do have some things that we have to kind of cover, right? I mean, anticlimactic is an understatement, it seems to me. What this officer in South Carolina was thinking is beyond my wildest understanding. This is a conversation that happened last night at the State House, and it's certainly the Raimondo administration going full frontal with their philosophy on taxation. And it's no doubt that it didn't get old for the fans of UConn, that's for sure. Your state of mind is important to us, and we'll find out what you have to think. So let's kind of dig in here. First item up, yeah, duh. 30 for 30. Congratulations, Zokar, Yokar, Jokar. I mean, there's got to be 10 different ways to say your first name, but there's 30 ways to say you're guilty, you bum, you this, you that, fill in the blank. Now, what we have is a trial, probably beginning on Monday, as to whether you ought to fry, or in this particular case, be injected. I will tell you that all that dramatic conversation included, there's going to be a lot of emotion and a lot more evidence thrown into the death penalty phase, including family members who've had to suffer through this and the actual events of the day. But remember, there's only one juror that's necessary to convince that, you know what, his brother made him do it. And I would imagine that the manifesto that he wrote at the end in the boat aside, which certainly doesn't work in his favor, we won't get a death penalty. Now, if I'm wrong, and I've said that here on the record and on the radio on WPRO weekdays noon to 3, more times than I can count, I'll eat my hat. I won't cry a river. I'm not a death penalty guy, but I won't cry a river if he goes that way. My guess is all of this has been about what we knew we could have had anyway in a plea, which is throwing the key away and letting him rot in jail. Next item. Camera got him. Yeah, you know, what came over this police officer in South Carolina is anybody's guess. You've seen this story, right? It's just unimaginable. Here's what CBS tells us about it.
Officer Michael Slager was charged with murder after a cell phone video surfaced showing him firing 8 times at 50-year-old Walter Scott as Scott ran away. The officer pulled Scott over Saturday for a broken tail light. Slager claims he feared for his life as the two struggled over his taser.
223, just got shots fired. Subject is down. He grabbed my taser.
But the video shows Scott ran away. Then the officer started shooting. After the shooting, the video shows the 33-year-old officer dropped something on the ground near the victim's body.
You know, this isn't Ferguson or Staten Island. This guy's been charged with murder. And rightly so. I don't know what's worse, this cold-blooded killing or the video that we so nonchalantly watch. You know, myself included, putting it into evidence here on Dan York's State of Mind. It's just a chilling situation. By the way, for police officers who complain that they shouldn't be videotaped, you're losing that argument, understandably. God bless that victim. I mean, my goodness. Wealth versus income, that's the concept that we heard about at the State House last night. Very interesting stuff. This is all about the Taylor Swift tax, and the budget person for Gina Raimondo gave a little lesson to the legislature in a hearing about, you know, different ways to be able to get money from the rich.
In general, it's more efficient to tax wealth than income. It provides a better incentive to keep the economy growing if taxes are more focused on, especially on higher income earners, focused on wealth. And one of the largest pieces of wealth is property.
Yeah, well, that's all true. This brazen philosophical argument the Raimondo administration is having on taxation is quite fascinating. You know, they've picked a couple of battles here that I don't know that they're going to win. I don't know what the General Assembly will do with this Taylor Swift tax, as it's known. You know, she's got the mansion in Watch Hill, and she stands as kind of a gubernatorial symbol for this tax. But the truth is, there's some 2,500 homes that are second homes that are up for this tax, and not all of them look like that, and not all of them have that kind of substantial wealth behind them. And then there's the taxation that is planned within the bill for people who are renting out property in Narragansett and on the beach, that kind of thing, over the course of the summer, where they've never been taxed before. And the online aspect of that helps the taxation. This is kind of poking at the bear here with the mentality of folks in Rhode Island. And I don't know that it's really a rich versus poor philosophical tax argument as much as another example of us not competing. Why would we want to do this when Massachusetts and Connecticut doesn't? Why can't we get a structure of competition on taxation and all of that so that we can put up a big sign that says, come here, we're more competitive? It doesn't seem like we're going in the right direction there at all. Hopefully the governor will be here soon and we can ask her about those questions. I don't think it's a problem. I hear a lot of folks talking about UConn and, you know, the boredom of all these wins. Last night they disposed of Notre Dame quite handily. Gino Auriemma now with his 10th championship, which is phenomenal. Some comparisons to John Wooden. I think he's handled those comparisons pretty deftly. They are two very different sports and two different, times in history. They don't have to be directly comparative. I mean, what he has done with that program stands on its own. They've just won the last 3 championships. Look, in America today, we need to celebrate excellence, not complain that we're bored by excellence, right? Your state of mind is important to everybody watching. You can post on Facebook, you can call at 228-1886, you can email at stateofmind@myritv.com or tweet at us. This is an interesting post from yesterday's conversation with Ted Nesi as we talked about the pension settlement. Why would anyone want to work or live in Rhode Island when you're told a contract you sign is just words and doesn't really mean anything? Yada, 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 yada. We could go on through that, but here's the operative words, key words. Contract you signed. That's the essence of the case. You didn't sign a contract if you were a union person. You received your benefits via statute, via law. Now, a governor signed a bill and a budget, but no one on the union side ever signed a contract. The argument over implied contract is the essence of the lawsuit, and that answer won't be had with the settlement. When we come back, a lot of controversy surrounding a team we love. Stay with us. So you've seen the renderings, the pictures. I've been able to stand by home plate with the co-owner. It is a short porch. Even I could hit a home run to right field if it goes that way. But this would be a fascinating development if, in fact, we see a stadium for the now Paw Sox in Providence that way. And the governor seems to be somewhat open-minded, at least on the record a few weeks ago.
I need to see the details. I'm open to anything that creates jobs and stimulates economic development. I'm not open to, yet again, being taken advantage of by another baseball deal. This could be a terrific deal, and I certainly am open to seeing it. I know many of the owners are from Rhode Island, so I'm very open. It'd be wonderful it could happen, but it's got to be a right deal for Rhode Island. I'm a watchdog for the taxpayers, and if there's a deal to be had that's good for the people and that creates jobs and stimulates 195, then that's a good thing to do.
Jim Skeffington, welcome.
Thank you very much. Happy to be here.
You've had so many interviews and questions posed to you that I'm going to try to see if we can leave what's pretty much understood and see if we can answer some questions that perhaps haven't been asked yet. But
I'm happy to have the opportunity to talk to you about it.
It was a fun walk around the alleged ballpark site the other day.
Well, it's a great site. It's one of the best sites that you're going to see for a minor league ballpark.
You were holding a non-press conference press conference. You
Well, it
thought
wasn't
you could
intended
get
to
away
be.
with just doing
Yeah,
a walking
I did.
tour, and you ended
I
up with
did.
a half-an-hour press
I
conference.
did. I didn't expect that.
It's better to PR people. They don't tell you that when you walk into 6 microphones, you're going to end up with a press conference?
Well, I think the media controls those issues, but I was delighted to have the opportunity to take people on a walk. I had received several requests. Could I get down to the site, the potential site, and walk around? And I said I would do that, and then we just turned into a news conference.
The governor's conversation about 38, I called her out on that one. I don't see this as a 38 Studios issue, and the baseball thing. But that 38 Studios thing is such a sore place for Rhode Islanders. We've gotten very lazy intellectually, I think, in applying it. I think perhaps you come into that play because you have, in your long, successful history here in Rhode Island, been a player in the kind of funding mechanism that 38 Studios was able to latch onto, this moral obligation bond issued by the legislature. Clear up the distinction, if you want to.
Well, first of all, it has no relationship to 38 Studio. We're talking Red Sox that have been in business for about 40 years, very successfully in Rhode Island. And as I recall, Studio 38 was a new startup venture with a lot of speculation associated with it. We have a track record of 40 years of very successful operations under Ben Mandor's legacy leadership. So I don't see the connection at all.
Does it give you any pause, though, that this now symbol for Rhode Islanders getting screwed, which is 38 Studios, even gets thrown your way in conversation?
Well, it doesn't shock me, but I think, once burned, twice shy. And I can understand, people being skeptical about projects as they come along. I like to think this is a much different project. I've been involved in many milestone projects in Rhode Island. I'm proud of them. They all had risks. They all have potential for success. I happen to think this particular project has got a very strong prospect of success. I think it's a game changer, as I said before. I think it'll lift people's spirits. I think it speaks to the aspirations of the community. I think it speaks to our confidence of where we want to be in the future. And I think it'll be a great asset in the sale of the 195 lands. Make no mistake about it, the 195 lands, in my view anyway, is critical to our economic success in the future. It's a rare opportunity, once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to bring in new business, high-paying jobs. We want to contribute to that endeavor. We think this ballpark will do that. We think it's catalytic. We think the type of companies that want to establish in biomed parks very much are interested in communities where they have ballparks and activities that attract the kind of workers that they have.
Economists who study this kind of stuff would argue, well, that would be a one-off opportunity because for the most part, they will say that it's a transfer of dough, it's an even economic outcome. It's not a high-income earning opportunity for employees. It's more about the investors and all of that, and perhaps you get a little quality of life. Now, I'm big on the quality of life bump that you might
So am I.
present, so I think there's value to that. But this notion that economic stimulation would occur from the placement of a ballpark is tough for people to get their hands around.
Well, it may be tough, but it happens to be accurate. And I can understand, listen, this is a project as to which regional people can differ. And I'm not suggesting this project is a panacea for all our ills. There is no panacea. There's no silver bullet here. But I happen to believe very earnestly that a ballpark will be catalytic. I think it will help lure the kind of industry that we want to have across the street on the 195 lands. And by the way,
so a biomed developer says, wow, I want to put my place next to a ballpark.
I think there's going to be some people who very shortly will come out and say something like that.
That you're aware of?
I've been contacted. I've received overtures from people who are interested in developing land.
So this is where I want to go. You're too smart. Your partners are too smart. You have too much seasoned experience, expertise, and all of that to walk into the purchase of this franchise with the notion of moving it unless you had ducks in order, some of which we have no idea what they are yet. I'm not talking about dirty deals. I'm not talking about back room. I'm just talking about knowing where this is going to play. So what is it that we don't know about what you think you can deliver?
I appreciate you telling us that we're very smart and so forth, but even the smartest people make mistakes sometimes, you know. I personally got involved in this because I represented the Boston Red Sox, and we were interested in buying minor league teams. And then as we went down that path, it became clear that the Red Sox wanted to husband some of their resources to do other things because they have other business operations. But I happen to think this is a very important asset. But most importantly, personally, I love the Pawtucket Red Sox. I love the Red Sox. I love baseball.
I get that, but tell
And
me.
so that's
what's
what
in the-
brought me. Well, that's what
what's in
brought
the-
me into the project in the first place. You asked me what brought me
Okay.
into the project in the first place. That's what brought me my passion for baseball, my passion for business, my passion to help my state.
I don't think
Those
I
are-
asked you that because I think you've answered it before, but what's in the pipeline? What am I missing here? What's everybody missing about the connection between economic development and this stadium at this location?
Well, let me say, I'm not sure what people's motivations are who claim that this will not be catalytic. I just point out to, let's say, go to Charlotte and go to Columbus, Ohio, and go to Dayton, and go to El Paso, Texas, and go to Durham, and find out what what economic development impact there was on all those stadiums in a downtown location.
And I've been to 2 of those 4, Dayton and Charlotte. Here's the thing, there's nothing else going on. I mean, Cincinnati's 50 miles down the road. A lot of people go to see the Reds games. Charlotte's got a little bit more of a proximity issue to Major League Baseball. We're in the armpit here, the healthy armpit
No, with all
of
due
Boston.
respect, with all due respect, Providence is a great city and a great location, and I would tell you that we had, just 5 years ago, the highest attendance in the International League for AAA baseball.
Understood.
So, and we're very close to Boston, but the Red Sox are a religion in New England. People love them. I just attended a luncheon today put up by the Northern Chamber. We had like 400 people there to welcome the team to the start of the season, which starts tomorrow night. So I think there is a direct connection between economic development and the prospects for it. I think this is catalytic. And I will tell you, if you go to those cities, as you did, and others too, you will find that, that people started to invest and develop restaurants, office buildings, educational institutions, all around those cities. Take Durham, for example. Duke invested millions of dollars around that ballpark since they started to develop it. And that's the kind of investment that I see happening in Providence.
We'll come back, some more questions for Jim Skeffington. Stay with us.
I don't want to be one of the principal owners of taking a team out of my own home state. So we have a common objective. The idea now is to get together and see if we can't forge a plan that's satisfactory to all sides. We've been asked if we would set forth a plan that would allow us to stay in Rhode Island. That's what we intend to do. I'd like to think we're being, recruited to stay here, as opposed to me petitioning to stay here.
I thought there was a fascinating comment at the press conference the other day. I took you on the radio side and hear about it. I think your marketing skills are second to none, and your conversation has been incredibly persuasive. But I think it takes, if I'm the governor and you're making those kind of public statements, I ask you to come in for an off-the-record conversation, and I say to you, you know what, Jim? If the numbers make sense, I want to do this, but do not put my legacy in a place where I am now judged by whether the Paw Sox stay in Rhode Island. And don't play this game with me on recruiting versus petitioning. That's what I would do, just to kind of set you back a little bit and say, wait a second now. You're a business person with a business plan who has an interest in growing your business plan. You hear me on that? Do you hear me on that? In other words, the salesmanship and the marketing of this is a very high finesse place. So let me ask the question. Who has more to lose? The state of Rhode Island and its now new leadership, or a guy who has a legacy himself in the city of Providence, who loves the city of Providence, and moving the team out if you can't make this deal downtown?
Well, let's start off with the proposition that I have a desire to give back to my community. And one of the things that motivates me is to try to build a ballpark in downtown Providence, which is more than the ballpark, which is not just baseball. It goes to a lot of other sports and a lot of other activities, because I want to change the face of Providence in some respects. If you drive by the ballpark now and you see that empty space, and then you imagine, if you will, a beautiful gleaming ballpark at night lit up with 10,000 people in there cheering on the Red Sox, a concert, Brown University football, a URI football, that excites me. That excites the city. It creates jobs. It creates a new atmosphere.
You've done that selling. Tell
I want to lift up the spirits.
Who loses more? If you're catalytic, a word we both used tonight, in taking this team out of this state with all that you've given to this state and the city and your heart and your soul and all the business transactions that you think have benefited the community, and I don't quarrel with any of those, you want to live with that?
Look, I have a plan A. My plan A is I have a vision, and the vision is I want to build a ballpark in downtown Providence because I believe it's going to be catalytic. I believe it's going to help the state. I believe it's going to be a great legacy.
And
for,
if it's
for,
not, you're
for
not going
decades
back to Pawtucket, right?
For decades to come. I believe that's the legacy.
Got it.
Now, I can only lay out my vision if the and this is an issue as to which regional people may differ, and I respect the differences. And if they say we hear your vision, we hear your arguments, we don't agree with you, we don't think it's going to be a good idea, then fine, I will move on. I'll cry, but I'll move on to Plan B.
And moving on is not going back to Pawtucket and redeveloping that property. Moving on is Worcester at
No,
all,
I think
whatever.
I think it's going to be involving. We'd like to build. Larry Lucchino and I would like to build a ballpark in an urban setting. We have a big passion for that. All our competitors in the International League and other leagues, the Pacific Coast League, the trend is to build it in urban centers, which we want to do. It attracts more fans. Gotcha. It's more successful, and we'll be all right.
If Plan A doesn't work, Plan B, well, your conscience will be clear to move this team out of Rhode Island.
I'm giving Rhode
It doesn't work
I'm giving Rhode Island the first option here. I'm giving the Rhode Island the
Some would say
opportunity
the
to
first
keep us.
option sits in McCoy. There are people who say, what do you mean? The first
That's not-
option is McCoy.
That's not an urban setting. We're looking to build a ballpark in an urban setting.
What about Point Street? When I take 195 and I come up 95, there's 6 or 7 acres of land. I had an economic development guy in the state say, hey, Dan, you ought to take a look at that property for those guys because that might work. And or Allen's Avenue. Have you thought about those other Providence options?
We have looked at all the options that we're aware of in Providence, including those two. And we've concluded that that's not an appropriate site for our ball club. We think we have better options.
What's up with this $10 million cost for a sewer line that's got to be moved on that 195 site?
Well, no one knows what the cost of relocating that sign is. By the way, it's not a sewer line. I believe it's a stormwater treatment facility and some piping that would have to be moved about 200 feet. Our engineers, I haven't talked to them, our engineers have met with the NBC, the Narragansett Bay Commission, and we're still trying to calculate the cost of that. We're willing to try to work with them and maybe fold that cost into our construction if it is not too much, and we'll see what we can do.
Well, the next conversation, and I'm so glad you came here interimly. I've been trying to explain to your PR folks that it's not a one-stop shop. You can come back weekly because I think this is a really important conversation. The next stop, as I understand, is that you're going to lay out the ask, you're going to have the financial business plan, and you're moving quickly. You're going to get this thing done or not by June, yes?
That's correct. We'll know in June whether or not we have reach common ground with the state.
And so it's
the city.
then that we can talk about the ask. Then we can talk about state or city subsidy for the property versus your investment in the structure.
No, I think we can talk about the ask before that.
Well,
I think we're finishing our cost estimates, and we should have that done hopefully by the middle of next week. And we'll lay out a plan. They've asked us to lay out a plan as to what it would take to keep the team here. Yes. We'll lay out that plan. There'll be numbers associated with it. There'll be an economic impact statement prepared by a consultant as to what it will mean to the state and the city, and that will frame our ask. And we'll let the leaders of the state decide whether they agree with our vision, whether they agree with our enthusiasm, whether they share our optimism. And if they do, terrific. We'll have fun together. And if they don't, I wish them all well. I would respectfully disagree, but we'll move on.
We'll leave that as part one of our conversation. And when you put that plan together next week, we'll have you back.
Well, I look forward to talking to you anytime.
Thanks.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
You bet. One more thing when we come back. Stay with us. Listen, like I've said all along, I think we need to keep an open mind on this Pawsot's project. It's going to come down to numbers, but it's going to come down to a psychology. And it's going to come back down to, who's asking to be on 195 and who's not, And what's $25 million invested in that land really going to mean, according to the governor? There's a lot of unanswered questions, not just from Jim Skeffington at this point. We'll talk about majority elections tomorrow night on Dan York's State of Mind. We'll see you then. Good night.